Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us once again for State of the Grizz. We are happy to be back with you for episode 4, featuring our esteemed and brilliant colleague from the Financial Aid Office, Christina Ortiz Harvey, and we're going to get to her momentarily. What I want to do is take this moment on this beautiful last day of September is give us a sense for where we are in the year. We are officially 2 weeks in from the start of the semester, which started back on September 12th. There's been an opportunity for both new and returning students to get acclimated to what some folks are calling the new normal. I refuse to do that because there is nothing normal about the state of affairs. And so
Right.
I'm just saying that we're adjusting to this routine for the time being, because I am very hopeful, like many other people that I've spoken to, that there will come a time when we will be back in each other's presence and bask in the energy that is each other's beautiful, wonderful auras. There's nothing like the energy of another living, breathing person around you to give you life. And so I'm hopeful that the universe will course correct. We find ourselves at an interesting time. You know, this has been said since we started State of the Grizz way back in April. And I think as I looked at the archives, April 1st. So, you know, we were the ones fooled by what was to come. But then we didn't know that 6 to 7 months later, we'd still be operating remotely and
Yeah.
virtually, that we'd have to change up a lot of our methods of existing, and that we'd be using and leveraging technology in a whole new way to maintain relationships, to maintain our connection to work, to deliver work, and to do functioning, if we can even call it that, as close to what we were used to as possible. Um, State of the Grizz was intended to be a method of communicating to the Gutman community and all levels of the Gutman community the things that are happening, the things that are important, the things that we need to know. So whether that's CUNY Central's latest guidance on how we're going to roll out classes and do grades and uh, uh, offer some of the remote instruction and some of the in-class stuff, all the way down to the current political climate and state of affairs, the Black Lives Matter movements, the just the continued criminal uh, murdering of Black lives, and seeing it played out in real time across the nation, and speaking to that and its effect on our population, and even more recently, just understanding how students are interacting with us through this medium, and the ways that it's working and it's not. So VP Pryor, my esteemed co-host and colleague, I present to you, that's the state of the Grizz currently. What say you to that?
Thank you, first of all, Nestor. I think you're right. I can think back to that first show in April and really just saying, all right, we want to get a message out to the community. We want to tell the community some things. And obviously it's evolved to a space where we're having conversations with community leaders, from the staff side, from the faculty side, from the administrative side, and most certainly, and I think most importantly, from the student side of the house and part of the community. And I'm glad we are here in this space now, and instead of just this like information sharing. When you talk about the state of the world, and I know we're going to spend significant time in the latter part of today's show in talking about these issues further, I think about where we were about a week ago, when we were all waiting with bated breath to hear the news out of Kentucky. And of all the things that we have discussed, and the way we have continued to move and bring these conversations forward, I've hit a lot of low points, but last week just took all of the wind out of my sails with the lack of an indictment and accountability for the murder of Breonna Taylor. And it just, for me, signified we're still in the hole 401 years. You know, when I think about the 1619 project that was brought to us and delivered to us as a gift last year to really help us to understand and put into context the history of this country and the lack of race relations and the lack of equity and the out and out white supremacy and the systemic and institutional racism. Watching that the city of Louisville begin to board up 2 days ahead of time, as if they knew they weren't going to go in a right direction to get justice for Breonna and her family. So one of the things that I've decided to do in connection with us being on the State of the Grizz, because when you and I spoke last week Thursday, I was doing a couple of things and I realized this broadcast is going to live on YouTube, on the college's page. People can pull it up and on the college's Instagram and other ways. So I thought, even if people aren't listening to me, they'll see me. And so each week I want to, just from my appearance being here as a Black man, grew up in a single parent home, vice president of a community college, father of 2 Black women, you know, brother, son of Black women, friend to a number of Black women. I thought that even my appearance here should always have a message. So one of the things that I've committed to, and I wanted to start with the t-shirt that I'm wearing today, is every time someone brings up the State of the Grizz and my face shows up, there's going to be a message attached to it, whether they're hearing and listening to me or not. So today's shirt, as everyone can see, is my Black Lives Matter t-shirt. And every week there will be something here that when you log in the State of the Grizz, whether you're listening to this message or you're just watching it, it'll be clear about where I stand, where we stand as an institution, and the things that we support, and the things that we are as a community working to change and to educate, support, and coach our students and arm them to change the world and move things forward. So I know I kind of went a little left of my usual welcome and how's it going, but these are the things that are here right now, and I got to get through this before I can get to this. Mm-hmm. So, like you said, the state of affairs, and people talking about the new normal. There is no new normal. There's a next reality, and we haven't realized it yet. We're in a transition period, and we're working our way there. So, Ness.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. And it's, I think we need that perspective. I think we need to be reminded of the ways that we show up and what that means in terms of impact to the community. And our intent is always to educate and grow and put people in the right place. Speaking of putting people in the right place, our guest today is a critical member of the Gutman staff who works tirelessly with her staff to ensure that our students are in the right place. And not only do I mean at Gutman, but I also mean in the right place financially so that they can remain at Gutman and successfully complete their journey with us. I'm speaking, of course, of our good friend and colleague, Christina Ortiz Harvey, who's with us as our special guest. Christina, how are you today?
I'm well. Thank you so much, Nestor. I don't know if I can live up to all that, but I'm gonna try my best. And hi, Charles. Thank you for that amazing intro. I think we're all feeling it. So I'm glad to be here. I'm excited, nervous, excited. You're not gonna talk about financial aid all day, every day.
Well, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to have you on the show, Christina. I know that as a student myself, many years ago, back during the Dark Ages,
Let's not go there. Let's not go there.
the Renaissance.
Recently. We can go there. Recently.
Financial aid was a mystery to navigate then, and we didn't have computers to do our data entry. I hate to date myself that way, but we were filling out forms and mailing them in and waiting for correspondence to come, snail mail. Technology has advanced to the point where you can instantly submit stuff and get responses back, but financial aid still remains a mystery, and a scary one at that for folks. And so prior to jumping into that, let's do a little deep dive and learn a little bit about the woman who directs the office, so that we can see how you've gone from, I believe, a CUNY alumna and having worked at multiple CUNY institutions, to now sitting in a position where you are one of the main gatekeepers that helps students find success on their college journey. So let's talk about
and we're going to rephrase that, Nestor. We're going to call Ms. Ortiz Harvey a key holder, because she grants access and information. You know, gates lock people out. Key holders welcome people in and give people access. And I know in my conversations with Christina and her team, it's all about providing access to systems, to information, and obviously to resources, so our students can be successful.
I can't have said it better myself. So, Christina.
Thank you. So, where to start? I'm always the worst about talking about myself, but in this environment, I'd be more than happy, because one of the things that I really do share with a lot of my students, anyone who has sat across from me in my office, which I dearly miss, and seeing my students, is that I really truly have an open door policy. And the reason for it, and my drive, is always about information sharing. It's really about, hey, there are so many resources. Every day I'm learning new resources. So this is not something that you learn once and that's it, it's gone. Every day I'm learning new things. Every day I'm sharing this information with my students. And, you know, a lot of that drives from how I grew up. I mean, I'm reflective of my students. So, you know, I'm first gen, you know, single parent home, grew up from Brooklyn. I'm a Brooklyn girl. And I'm a CUNY baby, as I like to call myself, because, you know, I started at Hunter with my bachelor's degree, and I got my master's from Baruch, and now I'm kind of working on my doctorate, so I'm getting there. And I definitely feel in a lot of ways, and it's always surprising when I share this with my students, it's always like, you know, I still feel very much like that, you know, 18-year-old that started school for the first time to get to college, and I had no idea. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. I was completing all the forms for my parents because my parents and my mom didn't know, things like that. So really being that independent and not knowing, it's like I only knew what I knew, and it wasn't a whole lot, you know. So it's that feeling of kind of frustration and like, okay, you told me, you know, I have to do this. I don't know why I'm doing it, right? Like, you're just telling me, like, do these things, but I didn't understand like how it all worked, and, you know, how so many different things can impact my financial aid. And there is no way I could have gone to college without my financial aid. So I had to learn a lot of things, you know, as they say, through fire and ice, because, you know, I didn't know any better. And it was very hard to get that information sometimes. And it really what drives me. And I tell my students all the time, like, if you have a question, whether it's financially related or not, and, you know, many of my students, you know, that come to me, and they're my regulars, as I say, they come and just checking about anything. And I'm okay with that, because I want to give information to my students. I want my students to be as empowered as possible, so that when they step away from government and they're going into that next level, there is no one that can tell them, no, that is not how it works. I want them to be empowered to say, well, let me share something about that no, right? Like, let me work around that, because it's really not no. And that's something that drives me, because, you know, I went through it, and I, you know, to this day, I'm still kind of working through it. And I never want any of my students to really have the kind of experiences that I have. I know it made me who I am, so I want them to have a little bit, but maybe not as much of a struggle if I can at least give them the information. What they do with it is entirely up to them, but I'll be more than happy to share whatever I know, for sure.
So in that vein, you have a specialized pool of knowledge about a process that is mysterious. For many students coming out of high school, This is the first time they've applied for financial aid. For a number of our students as first gen, they don't have parents who attended college necessarily or who had access to financial aid. And so here's this scary thing that's asking for all this information, and who am I sending it to, and what really happens when it comes back. And so, like, I don't want you to go into like a fully detailed federal process, but if you could help to demystify and put it in layman's terms, what that process is like and what it means with some of the key points along the way that get the student here. And I'm sure VP Pryor has some other interesting things that he'd like to.
No, I think that is probably the most intimidating part, is the paperwork and the process. So if you can kind of, talk through how we help students to navigate that, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. I think the first place I kind of want to start with is letting my students know that, listen, it's okay if you don't know the question or the answer, right? Like, that's okay. It's not the expectation, because you really are coming out of this K through 12 like environment where, in many ways, like for myself, I remember that like as it was yesterday. Everything, like, you got your schedule, everything was kind of done for you in some regards. Like, there was these magical things happening, like the little magical elves, as I like to call them, right in the background. And I just had to show up. Okay, I get my schedule and I'm doing things, right? And that's all I had to do. They'll give me a form. Okay, sign it. Okay, I'll go and sign it. Try to remember. But then you're kind of dumped into this environment. You're like, wait, I have to, what's my social security number? Like, what is this and what is that? And now I have to face the very scary FAFSA application, right? And a lot of the time, I think one of the biggest things is that a lot of the high school counselors will do the application for the student and not always include the student, or really kind of break it down. And the first thing I always tell my student, when it comes to financial aid, the first step, the first way I can help you and give you as much information and educate you about how to keep your financial aid is to actually apply, right? Like, I know it's an intimidating application, but honestly, if you just take a deep breath and you just start it, each question will actually point you to where you need to look for information. A lot of the time, my students, they're so intimidated, and I completely understand, like, they're in a way, like, they don't even want to look at the question, right? And they're like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what wages means or something like that. And it's kind of like, well, okay, let's take the fear out of it, right? Like, maybe that's a new word, maybe that's a new terminology. Let's take the fear out of it. Let's read the question and let's read the help. That's kind of the descriptions that are there, because it's really honestly pointing you to go here, check on this, like go to this line on your taxes and things like that. And a lot of the time when I show my students literally line by line, like, this is what this means, they always turn to me in a lot of ways the same way I did when I was applying for financial aid. It's like, oh, wow, okay, you know what? It was a lot of information, but it wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be, right? The first time you kind of do it. I think if I can just kind of take the fear out of it is really the applying, because a lot of my students are so intimidated to even start because they feel like I'll break something. Absolutely
Right.
not. Even if you make a mistake on your FAFSA, that's okay. If you notice it, you could always go back in and edit it, or you can, contact your financial aid advisor. We have an amazing team at Gutman, and, they will be more than happy to kind of go through the process and help you correct it and see how that can impact your financial aid. I think if that's one place I can start, will definitely be just applying, like the first step.
Yeah, I think with any process, especially one as important or pertinent to a student who really depends on financial aid, like the application, it's not even the application that they're intimidated by. Like you said, it's about making that mistake that might cost them something that has to do with their education. And to Nestor's point, unless you, for some other reason, were, doing these types of forms, going to a government website and completing information is nerve-wracking. Like you said, especially now, the FAFSA will tell you, you can find this here. You can find this here. But I can remember when the FAFSA came, on pieces of paper. Y'all can't see the piece of paper because of the virtual background. I just realized that. And you were trying to fill it out, but it's no less intimidating online. In many ways, it's more intimidating because there's also this thought that it has to be completed right now. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, I've got to get it done. and like you said, there's, the team, financial aid has been great working with our students and helping them to understand and digest it, but since you all do work with students, what's the one thing that students always have a question about? They're like, I don't know what to do here. What's the usual stopping point for most students when completing the FAFSA and the HESC application? Because we are in New York State. TAP is a huge thing for many of our students, and they're different systems. You know what I mean? But what's the one traditional hurdle for our students?
I think aside from actually, like you mentioned, like just kind of getting, like trying to pass the intimidation of just applying, I think the next step where I find a lot of students, and it's something that I'm particularly passionate about, is this notion of, I didn't know that. Like, oh, if I dropped a class, I didn't know that would impact my financial aid. Or if I didn't pass my classes, oh, I didn't know that had impact on my financial aid. I think that's like another big step for students, is kind of making those connections where financial aid is really not independent of your academics, right? Like, you're coming to college. Yes, there's, all these rules that we have to follow, but really understanding that, like, for example, your grades do impact your financial aid. It's, it's not necessarily immediate this very second, but like certain things, like if I drop a class, if I withdraw from a class, is usually one of those hurdles. And I think just as equally, aside from that piece, is verification. Like, when it comes to, if your FAFSA does have errors, or if you're selected for this process of verification, that's usually another very big area where it's like, I don't understand why I have to kind of complete this documentation. And those forms can be just as intimidating, because now you have to figure out, like, who's part of your household and this and what kind of documents and things like that. And people will honestly, like, stop there and not proceed, not realize that they're literally leaving money on the table. Like, I want to give you this money, right? I want to be just as passionate as you are about giving you this money, right? And they will kind of like almost like self-sabotage, because they're so afraid of like getting past it in a way, or even just coming in and asking for help, or asking the questions, or even being intimidated to see like, oh, this is such a silly question. Like, I always say, oh, this is such a silly question. And for me, it's absolutely not. You can ask me the same question a million times, as long as, you're getting those documents in and helping us help you, is, I think, the best way that we can work as a team. And don't be intimidated by it. If you don't understand, feel free to reach out to us, make those appointments. I mean, that's literally what we're here for, is really to help you optimize your financial aid. Because trust me, everyone on the financial aid team, that's like our goal. Like, let's get you the funding and let's help you keep the funding, because it's just not coming in the door. Like, yes, you get it now, but I want you to keep it. Like, I want you to keep it, from government. I want you to keep it for your 4 year, that kind of thing. So I think those would be my top two.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, one of the things that threw me for a loop, when we, my mother and I completed the FAFSA form, was the idea that I had to do it every year.
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I can remember being called into, the financial aid office, and they're like, you didn't do your FAFSA. And I was like, I did last year. What? Y'all gave me financial aid last year, and I was able to obviously, submit the paperwork and get everything. Again, as Nestor said, we from the generation where we had to mail everything. But, one of the things that is newer now, and you can, help maybe speak to this, is students are able to complete the FAFSA earlier in the cycle. So like for a continuing student at Gutman right now, when can they start filing the FAFSA for next year if they've already done their FAFSA this year?
On the 1st, literally
on the 1st
October 1st.
Wow.
October. So October 1st. So, this same week, you can go in and start doing your FAFSA. And even if you're like not 100% sure, if you're so afraid of making that mistake, I always tell my students, like, start it, right? Renew it. A lot of that information pre-populates from the prior year. You're just kind of verifying the new information.
Mm-hmm.
At the minimum, save the application and set up an appointment to see your financial aid advisors. Like, they're set up on Starfish. So there's always an advisor available to be able to assist you complete that application. But I always encourage my students, start it. Sometimes the students will not even start it because, they're scared, and I get it, and I totally get it. But I always tell my students, like, at the very minimum, start it, because there's some things that I have absolute confidence that you can do, and I'm totally okay. Let me come in and just kind of help you verify that everything else is okay, and then you can submit it. And feel confident that, okay, I did it right, and you build that confidence, because that's part of it. It's like, once you get, because in a way, all you need me to tell you is like, it's okay, go ahead, you did it right. We all need that validation, right? Like, okay, I'm nervous about this. So it's just like an assignment. Am I nervous about this? And I'll have someone look it over just to make sure it makes sense. It's the same thing here. You can always save it, have an FA advisor look it over, and help you maybe fill in the gaps. Like, I wasn't sure what this meant, so I left it blank. That's totally fine, as long as you kind of do that second step of setting up the appointment. Don't let it just sit there, because then, a lot of times when you let it sit, you're doing things last minute now for next fall. And it's a struggle at that point, because everybody's coming in to set up those appointments. And then you're worried about, wait a minute, am I going to get financial aid next year? And then it kind of haunts you until you get those applications in. And it is true, like you mentioned, there is a FAFSA application for the federal side, and there's a state application on HESC. And we do help you with both. So, definitely don't let that, application keep you from applying, because there's definitely funding out there.
Right. Yeah, and that's one of the other like tricky parts, is understanding the difference and where to go, and making sure, because the processes are a little different for HESC and for FAFSA. So I don't know if you can talk to those disparate processes.
Yes, I thank you. That is another interesting step, as I like to put it nicely. The FAFSA is definitely much more intimidating, because there's a lot more questions on the FAFSA, and you're looking at 2 different tax returns as well, for your parents, for yourself. So one thing that I always like to stress to my students is that everything you're receiving is technically financial aid. Like, sometimes students say, well, Pell is financial aid, and that's it. TAP is not necessarily. They don't put it together. So everything you're applying for is financial aid. Even if that's like federal loans, for example, if that's all you're eligible for, there's still great programs that are available to students who maybe don't qualify for grants. And that's also something that, I talk my students through. But definitely understanding, like, your FAFSA is looking at federal tax returns, and for the state, they're looking at New York State tax returns. And the TAP application is actually much shorter than the FAFSA. So a lot of the times I have my students go to the FAFSA, and like, in a way, it's like the brain is done. Like, I'm fried. There's no way I want to go through this again. And they won't even look at the TAP. And I'm like, wait a minute. Do you realize you could potentially be leaving $2,400 on the table, right? And that one is even shorter than the FAFSA was. It's a little bit more like direct with their questions and what they're asking for. So, do that encouragement for students whenever we can. Sometimes they take us up on it. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they'll listen to their fellow students, say like, listen, if you don't do that, you don't get the same refund that I just got, things like that. We all talk to each other, we know, but it is 2 different applications looking at 2 different tax returns.
Thank you for that. And I think that distinction is important for people to note, especially the 2, like you said, processes, but also what information they need to have readily available. You know what I mean? While most people file their taxes at the same, for the federal and for the state at the same time, they do need to make sure that they have access to both of those pieces. So thank you. So Ness, I mean, you went to school in upstate New York, so you did HESC and TAP, HESC and FAFSA as well. So you're familiar with that, juggling those 2.
Yeah, what's interesting is when we thought about this idea of having Christina join us for the conversation, it was because we're trying to trace the timeline of the student experience from admissions through their first couple of weeks. And financial aid was one of those offices, which in my day was called student accounts. And that was the office on the 2nd floor of the Netzer Administration Building in SUNY Oneonta. And you went and you stood online, and they had the 4 windows with the student accounts ladies, and then you went in and you showed your ID, and they found your account on paper, and they did your paperwork. Like this is how it operated. But there was always this thing of folks having information and asking me questions that I wasn't prepared to answer, because I didn't have conversations with my mom about her tax returns, right? That's just not a conversation that children have with their parents, especially when you grew up as I did in a Puerto Rican household. That was adult things, so you didn't ask about that. I suspect that is potential for some of our students. They're asking for things from their parents who don't speak English as their first language.
Right.
And so these are hard conversations to have at all, because the content is potentially asking for things that we don't traffic in normally. But then you mix in the family dynamics of, well, you're 17. You don't need to be asking me about my finances. And it's not because I want to know. It's because the
Right.
college I want to go to needs to know how much money you make, so that they can make a decision about how much money I can get for aid. And then there's the other side, which I think Christina alluded to, which is this notion of like free money. And when I was a student, again, federal aid, there was a ton of it. They were flush with financial aid. So I received EOP, HEOP, SEOG, TAP, Pell. I didn't look at loans legitimately until my senior year of college, and even then, it was a minuscule loan amount compared to what I had to do for my master's program. But that's where I want to get to, is this notion of ensuring that year to year your balance owed is as close to zero as possible, because if you have enough aid, then you should be able to keep that steady. Where if you're taking loans, that's going to potentially impact you post graduation or post leaving the institution, where that's money that the agency is going to come looking for. They're going to want that money back, regardless of whether you have a job lined up or not.
Right. And I think the other thing that, at least maybe you didn't touch on, but maybe it just invoked this as a thought, was how do you maintain your financial aid? You know what I mean? How do you continue your contract with the institution so that the government continues to support you in your academic pursuits? And of course, I'm talking about the dreaded SAP, that, I think folks maybe misunderstand what, SAP stands for. So, Christine, I don't know if you, can, just share maybe some things with students and with folks that are watching about SAP and its impact on students' ability to receive aid.
Absolutely. SAP is really definitely near and dear to my heart. It's something that I'm always talking to my students about. And SAP stands for Satisfactory Academic Progress. And, before this environment we're in, one of the things that I enjoyed the most was participating in Summer Bridge, because one of the things that I would always share with my students, after I kind of gave them kind of the dream, the rainbow, the unicorn, everything, right? Like, oh, listen, if you look on your account right now, you may have about $3,000 and $2,400. Let's think about your tuition. You're going to have this amazing refund coming back to you, right? And I give them that piece, and everybody's very happy. But after the next 10 minutes of trying to explain satisfactory academic progress, you can see almost the air. You can feel the air, just kind of like, wait a minute, there's stuff I got to do. Like, it's not just free. And I'm always very careful when I use that word. I actually try not to use the word free, right? Because let's be realistic. There is nothing really in life that's purely free. So one of the things I always stress to my students is like, listen, that's amazing. It's great. You did your FAFSA, you did all your applications, you have your financial aid. But now let's really get into the meat and potatoes of financial aid, because the one thing that hurts my soul the most is to watch students lose eligibility after their first semester, after their first year. And that's something that I always stress to my students. And that was that piece that I was talking about earlier, is thinking about how grades impact. And many, many students, especially because, let's be realistic, me as a first gen, it was out of high school. Regardless if I passed or failed, right? Like, it didn't have a financial impact on me. But now you're going to college and you're expected to know all these things. And it's really, really important for students to start kind of making the connections where, yes, it is free to apply. Absolutely. There is no fees to apply for financial aid at all. But there is a piece where, in order to continue to receive it every semester, every year, there is these little caveats that you need to know about, right? Like these little rules where the government expects a return on their investment. And they are investing in us, right? Because they want an educated workforce, ultimately, right? We want to go out, we want to have a career, we want to have a better quality of life, right? Like, that's why we're going through all this. Aside from just being a lifelong learner like I am, I'm always a nerd, so I'm always going to be reading something or learning something. But it's really understanding that, great, you have it, but what's the next step? And the next step is really maintaining your eligibility. And part of that is your classes. It's your grades. It's, if you're passing your classes every single semester for every class that you're taking, then you're on par to graduate in 2 years. If you're not and you're struggling, I always tell my students, I always stress, if you have no idea where to start with me first. Come to the hub, right? When we were on campus, which I so miss my hub, right? When we're on campus, you come to the hub. But if you're not even sure what the hub is, then at the minimum, remember my name, here's my email. Like, contact me. At the minimum, I can point you in the right direction. That doesn't cost me a thing. I'm absolutely okay with being able to at least give you the steps that you need in order to maintain your eligibility, but also to remain successful. And that's, like, if there's a takeaway from this, is really having students understand that, their grades do matter. The classes that they're taking, that's your contract, not just to Gutman, right? That you're agreeing to take these courses, but you're also, kind of starts your time clock, with the government, wherever funding sources you're getting, whether it's federal or state, they start counting, like, okay, great. You get the first semester. Well, now we have an expectation. You're taking 12 credits. You may need to at least pass half of those. If you don't, something gets taken away.
Right.
And now you have to wait a whole other semester, a whole other year to regain it. And then you have to jump through these hoops. And a lot of the time, even for myself, I didn't know that existed until it happened to me, right? One semester, just by 1 point kind of a thing. And my students always say, oh my God, I need a 2.0 and I have a 1.9. I'm like, right there. And I'm like, I am so sorry. Trust me, if I could find that point for you, I would. But the government right now has strict policies and I cannot go against it, right? So, been there, done that. And that's why I stress it from day one. All my students know from every summer bridge, understands, like, don't come to me and ask me why I took your money away from you, right? I didn't do a thing. Your academic records, your accomplishments, everything you're doing, you're really doing for yourself and for your family, right? Like, let's go. I did it for my family. They're doing it for theirs. So understanding that piece, that there really are consequences, and to avoid it, please come in and ask the question. I'd rather you ask the question than to lose it later. For sure.
Yeah. And one of the things that, the conversation around SAP makes me think of is the 12/6 calendar, and how to really navigate that to protect, ensure, concretize your aid, if you have a misstep, and those things happen, but, I don't know if everyone understands that, the 12 and 6 week terms are part of one semester and what that means from a financial aid basis. So if you could, explain that in a minute or so, just so that people or folks that are watching this are clear.
Absolutely. One of the biggest impacts with that is that we're paying for both sessions combined. So if you have, classes in fall 1 and fall 2, that combined together, we're paying for your financial aid. So whatever you're eligible for based on that enrollment for both sessions, we're paying for. Where I find the misstep is that students will come, oh, you know, I took 9 credits in fall 1, I'm gonna drop that 3 credit course I have in fall 2 and just come back, you know, for spring. And when they do that, they don't realize and they don't kind of put it together that when I keep saying, well, TAP, you have to be full-time, you know, for the regular like TAP program, then if you're no longer full-time, it doesn't matter when it happens in that semester. If you happen to drop a future class that hasn't started or you get a WN grade, for example, that has a direct impact. You will literally lose up to $2,400 in less than 24 hours. I mean, that's how significant it can be. And there's nothing that hurts my heart more than to see that happening, having to do that. So one thing I would definitely stress to all of you that are listening is remember that we're paying for both sessions. One of the ways that, like, for example, one of the ways when I'm talking to the student, and it's always case by case, because not everyone can take 12 credits in fall 1, right? Like in that first session, that 12-week major session. And I understand that. But for those that can, I recommend do it. If you cannot, because, you know, the 12-6, the one benefit of that is that maybe I can do 3 classes in 2 classes, right? Like spread it out a little bit. That's absolutely fine as well. But just be mindful that that second session was counted as part of your financial aid. It's not separate. So if you drop those classes before starting, or if you get WN grades, that will impact it. And then that would drive us to have to remove aid, because we can only pay on classes that you actually attended. So if you didn't attend it and you dropped it, we're required by law to literally reevaluate your entire eligibility. And you can easily end up, some of my students can easily end up with $3,000. And let's be realistic, just like I said, I relied on my financial aid. If I didn't have the $3,000 to begin with, I'm not gonna have $3,000 in December, that's for sure. So, you know, don't do it. Just don't do it. If I can stress anything, taking off my director hat, and Christina speaking, please don't do it. If you are even in doubt, come talk to us. Just come talk to us. There may be options, right? Like, don't do it.
Thank you for that, Christina. I mean, I think those are sage words of advice. And what's the email address to your office?
Is to email the financial aid office directly. It's financial.aid@gutman.cuny.edu. Now, if you don't think that we're not checking, I can personally say that we are checking our emails and responding every single day, because we're all taking turns within my team. They're amazing. They're going out there and they're literally answering voicemail as we get them, and answering to every single email. I myself have covered and I have done the inbox, and you'll be getting emails from me throughout the day. I don't recommend anybody else in past 5. You might be actually even getting it past 5. But the financial aid, thank you, Nesta. For the financial aid webpage, that's definitely a go-to place, right? Like, email us if you have questions. If it's something a little bit more complicated, feel free to set up a Starfish appointment. There are Starfish appointments set up every single week that you can see any of the financial aid advisors that are available, you know, based on your schedule and things like that. I mean, we really work very hard to make sure that our website is up to date with as much information. And if I could just take a second, if I could stress anything else, ladies and gentlemen, please, on a daily basis, check your Gutman email. You have no idea how many times I have sent scholarship opportunities to my students. They'll respond a month after the deadline and say, can I get that money? And I was like, nope, sorry. Like, there is instructions. Like, I've emailed you 3 times, you know? And that's our, not just myself or the entire office. We will always send you information to your government email. So as Nestor is showing, we have, you know, our contact information. Definitely, I recommend to send it to the financial aid@Gutman email, only because we all have access to it. If you send it directly to me, I will respond. You know, it may be later in the day, it may be the very next morning, but it's, for me, I really do take my students very seriously. So I do check it all throughout the day, but you know, we're also human. So I may not be able to respond as quickly as maybe someone else on my team who's available to answer that email even quicker than I can. So definitely default to the financial aid email address whenever possible, so we can get you the answers you need. Thank you, Nestor.
Yeah, of course, of
And
course.
thank you, Christina. I mean, that was amazing. Thank you. That was
Oh, thank you for having me. It's just like I always joke around. Nestor knows, he's already laughing about it. I could talk about financial aid all day, every day. And that's what I tell my students. It's still open door policy. You can email, you can, call. If you do call and I can't pick up right away, I do get phone calls. Leave me a voice message. Don't be afraid of leaving a voice message. We're checking those every single day. And a lot of students think like, really, you're checking? Yes, we're literally checking them every single day. And we do try to respond, within reason, obviously, but we do try to respond as quickly as possible.
I will say that we do have a comment in the chat, and it comes from Vanilla Bean, who may be an enrolled student at Gutman, but they said that this is helpful information, which is the best kind of affirmation that we could receive in this environment, is that someone acknowledges that this is information that they need. And I think that while we started this conversation talking about demystifying the financial aid process, at least prior to us going live with the chat, as Christina and I chatted before the program began, we got to that place where college still continues to be a mysterious kind of entity for many families. It's with its systems and its processes and its admissions procedures and SAT scores and GREs and GMATs and your GPA requirements. There's a language there, right? Like a collegiate language that we can speak fluently at this point, but we've been now blessed to have 15, 20 years plus in this system, so it's kind of second nature. For some folks, not only is English not their primary language, but college is also a different space to understand. And so not only do we have the burden of helping families navigate to the institution and then get themselves situated into a particular institution, but then once they're there, it's processes like financial aid, which for every year that you're a student, we want you to apply. Even if you don't think that you qualify, apply anyway, because you never know. And I also want to call back to something you mentioned earlier, a statement that you said, Christina, leaving money on the table. Just yesterday, the SGA president did a presentation on scholarships, grants, and loans in the SGA Live program. And one of the things that she said that she discovered was how often students don't apply to scholarships. And then I chimed in, having sat on scholarship committees where we have thousands of dollars to distribute. And me and the 7 other people in that room are reading 5 applications for 15 to 16 different scholarships that could make a student's journey easier to navigate, or at least take a little bit of that financial burden off. And all it requires is some demographic information and an essay.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
absolutely.
Couldn't have made it any easier.
right.
And we also teamed up with, the Office of Student Engagement, and we have a scholarship website where we're literally, every time I'm getting solicitations all the time about scholarships, and we're posting it online, and we're trying to get, when I tell you that it feels sometimes like I am begging for students to kind of apply for scholarships. I'm like, listen, I happen to have this scholarship here, apply if you feel like you qualify for it. And many of them are very general. They're kind of like, it's just like you mentioned, Esther, it's an application and an essay. That is it. And also, one thing I did want to add, if I can, is to also accommodate for some of my student population who may not be eligible to apply, for example, for the FAFSA application, due to not qualifying, due either you're undocumented, don't have the citizenship to apply for federal aid. There is now, through the Peralta Act, aid that's now available to students who otherwise wouldn't be able to get financial aid. So now there is physically state aid, state financial aid that they can apply to, and it could pay up to your full tuition. And I'm going to stress that because prior to this year, there was very, very little financial assistance available, to undocumented students or to students who didn't have the citizenship status to apply for the federal aid. Is now there is funding. If you need help to understand how to apply, I will be more than happy to help anyone. Like I said, I don't want anybody leaving money on the table. And we also have the scholarship support, as Nesta was just showing, where that information is there as well. We have an internal scholarship, for an outside scholarship that, we've been blessed to have at Gutman, but we also now have New York State aid. And a combination of that can literally cover your entire tuition. That's up to $2,400. There is no beating that.
Fantastic. Christina, thank you so very much for your time today. Really do appreciate it. As the student put in the chat, this was helpful information. But more importantly, thank you for the job that you do and the passion and commitment with which you apply yourself to your engagement with our students. It shows in, through your team and through the students when they come back and say that how helpful financial aid was. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, for having this platform for my students. I'll be more than happy. And we have an amazing team. So, I'm just as blessed because I cannot be this passionate and be able to talk to any student without my team. So I give them a lot of credit, a lot of kudos, because there's no way that I can do it by myself. And, we're all equally very passionate. You're going to walk away understanding a little bit more. It's okay if you don't understand everything, because you're not going to talk your ear off about this stuff. But at least if you get a little bit some new information every single visit, every single time, I'm totally okay with that. But it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's our pleasure to have, we love it when our guests are just as excited as we are to deliver timely, relevant information that's going to make your experience better and hopefully put them in a position to help someone else. So, I think we accomplished all of those things. And so with 6 minutes to go, before we turn on the show, VP, are there any last minute thoughts that you have about stuff that you want people to know about?
I know you've got event slides, and we'll get to those in just a couple of minutes. I just want to remind people, we had a fantastic discussion today at 1 o'clock with Dr. Marcus Allen through UMOC, Women of Grit, and our accessibility office as a reflection and response to last night's debate, which was, to say the least, a little difficult to watch. And I'll put a pin in that and then that sentence and sentiment there. But my goal and what I want to say to people is voting, being engaged in what's going on in your community are vitally important. And what we saw last night, what we continue to see throughout the country and around the world are examples of why we have to be civically engaged. I think I mentioned it here, but we talked about it earlier, Nestor. We're 401 years in the hole. We've got some tremendous work to do. Thank you to President Centrone for, her words to the community and to our students last week to stay engaged and to remind us that while this country was not necessarily founded for us being persons of color, it was founded on the ideal that the people have a voice and that the people need representation and folks in office that are going to support and protect those that they took an oath to protect. We know the system needs to be updated and evolved in order to actually include us in its protections. So, as I said, as we host these State of the Grizz conversations, I'm going to continue to use this as a platform, not my only platform, but as a platform to promote folks getting engaged and being the change that they want to see, all of those euphemisms, but more importantly, and I think for me, and we always talk about this, is being informed, knowing what the folks' roles are that we elect, the folks' roles who, are hired, and understanding and being knowledgeable about the history of this country and how to move it forward. That's the task that is before each of us today. That is what in 2008, President Obama ran on, this idea that we can make a change, and we have to get back to that. Because if not, you can see as product from the 2016 election, the direction that this country can very quickly go into. And that's a danger to us all. It's a danger to all of our civil liberties. But more importantly, and you talked about this from a global perspective, there's a lack of respect for America and Americans right now globally. And that's, for me, a direct product of the lack of leadership in our head of state. So I hope folks recognize that at just shy of 300,000 people, the voting, civic, and just people power that the university has at its fingertips, and know that they are a part of that cog that's going to drive this wheel forward. So thank you for creating space for that. As always, I want to, thank our essential workers, our healthcare workers, and our folks that are holding our government facility down. Thank you to Christina for making time today. Again, that was awesome. I wish, 26, 27 or so years ago when I was filling out that FAFSA with the pink, with the puke pink top, and writing those, filling those bubbles in, that I had someone as knowledgeable as you to assist my mom and I, and, but we figured it out. I won't tell you, we had those old school encyclopedias and, we figured some things out. No computer in the house, we're talking the early 90s. But thank you so much. Again, students, I want to remind you that we're here, and we got your back. But more importantly, we're here to be collaborators and coaches and supporters of you as you continue to move things forward. And we will be there with you and are there with you arm in arm. So Nestor, my man, what we got coming up?
Okay, we got so many different wonderful things happening. And as always, we're going to ask people to please. Somebody's phone is going crazy.
Not me, I promise.
We're going to ask people to go ahead and visit the Gutman Community College website. I'm trying to get the screen share up right now with my setup here. So many screens I'm looking at, but my hope is that everybody right now is looking at the Gutman Community College main page. Right here in the middle, this tab called Events. If you click that, this events page will open up down here and give you a listing of like the 3 most recent events that are going to occur. And then if you scroll down and you click this More Events tab right here, the page will change as my internet allows me with my suspect bandwidth. Will take you to a full listing of all of the events coming. Right now we're up through and into October. So events for the rest of today, college fair is happening right now. The midweek mental fatigue program starts just right now. The parent info session starts at 6:00 p.m. So that's going to be occurring. A multitude of things accessible. One click off the main page, gutman.cuny.edu/events. And that would be always there for you. And we're going to try to update that and keep it fresh content so you can bite into it and feel nutritionalized. I just made up a word. It's nutritionalized. It's been a long day, and this is only the fourth.
Okay, Jesse.
Fourth meeting. But we do have a couple of things that the
Friends
office
from the from who in the 80s know the reference, but I'm sorry.
Some of our partner key holder agencies have sent some stuff that they wanted me to share. So I'm going to share those very
Please.
quickly with you all. If you look at this screen, free Wi-Fi is available to free or low-cost internet to New York City students and their families for 60 days. And so the Office of Accessibility would like for you to point your browser to this particular website. It's on.nyc.gov/3CGP capital NZZ. And that's going to take you to an application where you could fill that stuff out. As we mentioned earlier, today is the first of our Parent Connect sessions. And so this is getting to know Gutman during the time of distance learning. It happens at 6 p.m. And you can email accessibility services at gutman.cuny.edu so that you can get a spot in the Parent Connect. And this is our opportunity to connect with the parents and or guardians for our students and to help them understand and uncover a little bit about what's happening here at Gutman Community College. And then our online services, of which there are many different paths to get to the information that you need. You know, if we needed further demonstration of what Christina was talking about, there's a multitude of ways that you can connect with us. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down is the Office of Financial Aid. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 offices are featured on this form to give you some access to some service that you may need to help you be successful as you continue across your Gutman experience. And finally, here we go. Our good friend in counseling and wellness, Courtney Stevenson, has shared with us the Movies for Mental Health free online event. So it's short films, anonymous chat-based discussion and resources, Wednesday, October 7th. This is going to be featured on our events page. So the link will be clickable there for you in case you want to write down all of these letters for you. But this is ensuring that our students are mentally healthy and have a connection with the community that is out there to listen to them. And finally, again, our friends in accessibility are offering these fall tutorials in Starfish and Blackboard. Two of the main ways in which our students connect with us and engage with us, Starfish being one of the platforms that we track their progress and allow them to create appointments with various offices and our staff members. And Blackboard is the main academic content module system. So a lot of the classes and the coursework is hosted in the Blackboard module. And so we want our students to please go there and see that stuff. And finally, go to the government website, reach out.
Yeah. There's a ton of information available, and I know sometimes it feels like information overload, but what we've tried to do is sort it in a way that things are easy to find. You know, one of the things, I know students have seen it, I don't know if they've taken the time to read it. Every Monday, I try to send out an update from my office with things that are coming up, with things that we feel are helpful, given this juncture or that juncture of the year, you know, whether it's this week or 2 weeks from now. We try to update the information that we're sharing with you so that it's relevant, to the coming weeks. So please, you know, take a look. You know, if the email is not helpful, look on the website. As Ms. Christina Ortiz Harvey said, you know, give our officers a call. There are folks available to answer the phones, and they will get back to you if they're not available when you call, because they're, you know, assisting another student. But we're here to support you. We're going to continue to reach out and hope that it is not information overload, but we want to make sure that we make you aware of all the resources that are available to you. That's our motto. We've got your back. And that's our promise to you, that when you decided to come to Gutman Community College, we decided that we were going to make available to you all the resources that you need to be successful. That's our promise, and we hope that you'll engage with us and meet us in those spaces so that we can support you. So Nestor, again, fantastic show. Season 2, show number 4 is in the books.
It is. And the word of the day, because you didn't give us one before, is nutritionize. So find a way to work that into your scholarship essay.
No problem. Just do yourself a favor. Put quotes around it. And learn the proper citation so you can give Mr. Melendez credit.
Yes. So once again, thank you to Christina. Thank you to Latoya and Joanna, our behind-the-scenes technicians who keep us up and running. Always thank you to my co-host and partner in crime, VP Pryor, for keeping us fun, for reminding folks of the wonderful things that we do at Gutman for our community. Tell us again what the motto is, VP?
What? Oh, that we got your back. We're here to support you. And like I said, every week, I'm going to wear a different T-shirt to remind us of that we need to stay engaged, and we need to continue the conversation, and we need to say their names. So I'll see you soon, Grizzlies. Nestor, 2 weeks from now, same bat time.
Same bat channel.